All right, everybody, welcome back to Off the Grid on the Record, where we sit down with folks building real solutions in clean energy, climate tech, and infrastructure. Today's guest is someone who's helping rethink solar from the ground up, or maybe more accurately, from the curbside up. Antonia is the founder of Gizmo Power, the company behind the Mega electricity generating appliance. It's a PV EV charging carport. So, Antonia, how are you? Welcome. Give us a little bit of a background about you, and we'll get into it.
I am great. It's so great to see you. I just finished my master's in mechanical engineering at UC Berkeley, and I studied physics in undergrad. And so the nice thing is, this was actually a college project. That's how it started in 2020 when my dad taught me how to weld in our garage when we were all trapped at home. What better thing to do than to TIG weld in your garage? But essentially, my dad and I, it's a family company. It's myself and my mom and my dad, Erika and Antonia Ginsberg-Klemmt. We call ourselves the Gizmo Berg-Klemmt. So we are Gizmo Power, which is actually an acronym. You don't have to remember this, but this is extra information for you. It's Garage Interior Storable Modular Photovoltaic on Wheels with Integrated EV Charger Rack. Gizmo Power. So
Wow.
it's our solution, our technology is called the Mobile Electricity Generating Appliance, which is a mobile solar carport. So that way renters or people don't have to own their house if they want to own their solar, or say if their house doesn't have the right kind of roof to stand it, or if they plan to sell their house and move or end their lease, you could take the solar with you is the idea. Originally, it actually putting the system on wheels makes it a totally different deployment method. So it's not permanent rooftop, it's not permanent ground mount. Making it a solar appliance really changes the whole permitting process too, because most of the time, when people ask you for whatever information for getting an interconnect agreement with your utility, they usually ask, well, is this a rooftop or a ground mount system? We're like, well, we are neither. Interesting enough, I just spoke at a plug-in solar conference in Germany, and they have what's called balcony solar. So people living in apartment buildings, they could just put their panels on their balcony and then plug it into their wall. We're that exact same concept, but on a larger scale, like a 6 point on a mega scale.
That's amazing.
Thank you. It's really exciting, but there's so many regulatory challenges when it comes to plug-in solar, because the safety standard, the UL standard, like appliance standard for electricity generating appliances, does not exist. They only exist for appliances that consume electricity. Goodness for, whatever shall we do with appliances that make you money, is the idea. So we've actually
That's
done.
amazing.
Thank you. So the idea is try to make it as fast and easy as possible. So we're working with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab on writing out a new UL standard. We're working with UL too. So that way it would essentially be a safety approved appliance. I know a lot of listeners may be concerned about, what about the kind of backfeeding that can damage the grid or line workers. In reality, I've actually done research and it shows it actually does not damage the grid, especially when generating during say peak hours, or also with specially strategically timed EV charging. And it also has all the integrated components that if the grid shuts down, the megas will shut down. So that way there's no concern about the line workers having any sort when they're trying to fix the grid back to bring it back up and running. But we are also a connection agnostic company. Your whole podcast with Off the Grid, we can provide off-the-grid solar. That way nobody has to go through this permitting problem that we're trying to address with the mobile aspect. But we could be off-grid with the battery, hardwired, like your standard rooftop system would be, or in our case, plugged in to an outlet, which we have already 2 approved systems in the US approved for interconnection via a plug. So we've actually, interesting enough, gotten them approved as EV chargers with just coincidental solar arrays. So it's you go to,
Wow.
so it's kind of, I almost see it as a Trojan horse almost, hey, we're looking to get approval for an EV charger, it just happens to have on-site load compensation. And then so we have the very first system approved was at the Lakota tribe by Chief Henry Red Cloud at the Red Cloud Renewables in South Dakota. They're the first legally interconnected PV EV charging, public PV EV charger station at the Lakota tribe. So we're hopefully going to be actually working a lot more now with tribal nations. And our second approved system was in Las Vegas. We're also part of the Nevada net metering program now via a plug. So it's quite exciting. So we're turning sunny driveways and sunny parking lots into power production zones.
That's amazing. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
I've always loved the innovation and actually seeing ahead and just being excited about whatever it is you're doing. So,
Thank
the
you.
question I
Thank
always like
you.
to start off with, of course, is the why. So you mentioned that you went to school and you finished your degree and this was just a school project, but
Mhm.
what moment or problem really sparked the idea for Gizmo Power? Like what gap were you seeing in solar access?
I mean, originally, I'm going to be like fully transparent here. It kind of started as a selfish idea because I'm from Florida and I was parking in the blazing hot sun every day. I was like, wow, wouldn't it be nice to just park a car in the shade? And I've seen solar, don't get me wrong, I've seen solar carports before. And I have a tiny little Nissan Leaf, little tiny It's basically like a golf cart at this point because it's from 2012.
Yep.
So it's gone down to like 50 miles in one charge. And its New College has chargers in by the physics building parking lot, but they're all in the sun. It's like, man, the airport right next door has these massive PV carports. Why can't we have them here? And turns out it's mostly because of the permitting for a permanent structure. So permanent systems, it brings up the price by almost like 3 times as much as like say the hardware would cost because you have to go through, especially in Florida, you have the risks of hurricanes. Like it has to be up to like wind code. And so then my dad and I were like, well, what if we just made a carport that's on wheels that can move? That if there is
That's
a hurricane,
amazing.
it can collapse and roll into a storage facility or a standard garage. So that's what we did, and our systems have survived hurricanes because of that. So the idea is it can roll in and out of a garage. It's collapsible. So that's where my dad and I came up with solar on wheels, and we now co-own the patent on it. And then we realized later that even just like despite the mobility aspect of kind of using it as a form of environmental activism, it's actually a huge benefit for renters or people who don't own their home and don't want to install a permanent solar system on their roof. They could have an equally as powerful system in their driveway that's simultaneously shading their car. So that's the evolution of the story of it, of like where we came from. So it's
That's
interesting.
incredible.
Thank you.
It's really cool to see that it was intentional because I think one of the
Yeah.
biggest selling factors is the fact that someone can literally roll this into their garage during the storm and
Yeah.
that's it, call it a day. You're not worried about, shingles flying off. You're not worried about
Mm-hmm.
anything, like weather damaging. I
Exactly.
really, really like the idea that it was intentional and it's
Thank you.
not just something that
Yes.
you're rolling with, which is incredible.
Thank you. A nice thing to add too is we did engineer it to withstand 170-mile-an-hour winds when including the ground mount pins. However, that being said, we can't guarantee other things will fly and hit it. We could guarantee
Fair
that
enough.
up to 170 miles it can stay put. I can't guarantee that there's going to be lawn chairs and stuff flying at it. So hence the idea of collapsing it, rolling it into a standard garage. We made it exactly the height and dimensions needed for a standard garage, so that way it perfectly rolls in, and your car can still also fit under it. It's a little complex, and we don't recommend it doing every night. Like this is obviously like an emergency situation. This is an option, similar to like mobile homes are technically mobile if you really want to move them, just like this is also technically mobile if you really want to move it. The wheels are also removable, so that way nobody can just up and steal your appliance. You can think of them as like roller skates. You put little roller skates on your mobile electricity generating appliance, roll it wherever your heart desires. And also, if people need to repave a parking lot, I'm thinking for like business owners, most people rent the space that they're using, or even if they own the space they're using for their business, if they're like paying tons of electricity bills, or if they want to have a shaded parking for their employees in the back, they've got like a ton of sunny paved area, this is a fantastic option for them. And then they end their lease, they move their business elsewhere, they could take the solar with them. So I'm still very optimistic about it all. It's a new deployment method, and one challenge is it's not like deep tech. The patent is literally with a rack on wheels. So we're component agnostic. We could use any kinds of panels, any kinds of inverters, any kinds of connection ability. Oh, here's my little collapsible diagram there. But it's really not deep tech, and that's the deep tech part is like we take advantage of those amazing people out there that are creating higher efficiency panels, and we use bifacials with cells on the top and the bottom. Which most ground-mounted systems use out there to take advantage of the sunlight bouncing off the ground and then reflecting on the bottom, increasing the overall efficiency, because with rooftop systems, they have to be monofacial. So just
Mhm.
taking advantage of all that real estate you've got. So it's been really exciting.
That's incredible. That's really great. And
Thank
I think
you.
it's really interesting to see how you're talking about renters, people who don't own their homes. I think that's
Yes.
the biggest bottleneck in regular
Mm-hmm.
solar is because you're obviously looking for people who are able to afford the higher price tags,
Yeah.
but there's not much going on for renters or communities in remote areas or
Yes.
even EV
Exactly.
owners who can't charge at home. So I think that's a great, area in the market to be in. I'm just wondering, what's the biggest surprise in terms of who's reaching out to you or wanting to try this?
Originally for me, the biggest surprise was the tribal nations, because right now they're very independent, but my dad went to a tribal energy symposium and Chief Henry Red Cloud reached out to him and now they're very close friends. He's just regularly flying to South Dakota with his buddy Henry, Chief Henry Red Cloud, and they're
Amazing.
really like working together on scaling this for tribal nations because we found out we realized that tribal nations are their own AHJs, meaning authorities having jurisdiction. So they can approve their own interconnections, they can approve their own projects. So us having to uh, go through that walking backwards uphill of trying to get approval from utilities, versus tribals basically can approve their own interconnections. So that would make generation via plug in tribal nations a lot easier, and then we can use that as a proof of concept. And also, like with proof of concept in Europe, I thought having Europe having plug-in solar was enough of a proof of concept. Like, hey, look, they're doing it, why can't we do it too? So that was the most
Exactly.
exciting and most surprising and the greatest blessing of all time. Is that connection? So I'm actually speaking. I'll be tabling at a another tribal energy symposium near in Oregon. So I'm flying into Portland mid June for another tribal energy symposium. So if you happen to be near Portland, Oregon, you can come see Gizmo Power at another tribal
I'm
energy
sure
symposium. So
we'll put a little bit in the description to get some people
yeah,
excited about it because
yeah.
it's a great idea.
Thank
I mean, with
you,
something
thank
so
you.
new, of course, and I'm sure with something so new, I imagine there's an education curve. So
Yes.
how are you getting this in front of the right people, the ones who don't even know this is possible? Myself included. I can look at the website, I can read all about it, but there's an aspect of speaking with you that is really is really eye-opening, and I think people are going to learn a lot from this. So
Thank you.
yeah, it's kind of how are you getting this in front of people?
Well, luckily, my parents are so incredibly supportive, and then that we have won multiple prizes to gain us publicity. And also, we have the benefit of the fact that we are simple tech. We are just a new deployment method. So I feel like for a lot of people, it's easy for them to understand. But the mobile aspect still requires some explanation. It's like, why would this need to be mobile? We won the South by Southwest Student Innovation, the Innovation Award in the student innovation sector. So
It's
that was
amazing.
huge.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. It was super exciting. I got to share the stage with Mark Cuban. It was a cool time. So
Wow.
it was, it's getting more and more publicity. But I'm now attending. I'm part of more and more podcasts and trying to really get it out there for like also younger innovators. That tech can also still be something. I even think the most simple tech can be the most impactful in many
Mhm.
ways. But to fully answer your question, how are we getting our word out there? We're not really like spending money on like communications or marketing. So most of the time it's just us like, we're trying to be very careful with how we scale too. So we're not seeking investors. We're just being very careful because if we get investors, then like we'll have to bring up our prices. And that's the whole opposite point of what
Yeah.
we want to do. We don't want to bring up our prices. We want to be the most affordable solar option out there, which we have been since day one. So even though not that's the problem is like not everybody has a sunny driveway. Not everybody has
Mm.
or like their driveways are like really tilted, especially like I had some people in California like my driveway's on quite a significant hill. Could I have your system there? I'm like, I have to calculate the coefficient of friction for you to make sure it doesn't slide down. But we probably definitely have to consider a bunch of safety factors. And we're definitely like honestly just open to anybody who wants to support us and like our mission because it's definitely a environmental activist company. My dad was one of the founders of Greenpeace Germany when he was our age. So back in
Wow.
no, back when he was a youngster, he was out there protesting the oil rigs, and now he's like, how can we have turned this into a company? So which is great. You know, my dad, I call him my Lorax. He's out there like speaking for the trees and like exposing people when they're wrong. But sometimes you have to be a little careful because we need people on our side. And my dad can, of course, like his emotions are absolutely valid, especially giving like if some like let's say political decisions made like banning net metering for example, he'll get very emotional like I want nothing to do with that state. I'm like, well, we could just do off-grid there, even though like that defeats the whole point
It's
because we
always an
want to move the
option.
needle. We want to move the needle, and the only way to move the needle is with plug-in solar. So it's kind of a lot of times I find myself playing good cop, bad cop. My mom and I find ourselves playing good cop, bad cop with my dad because he's so passionate and he's obviously like seeing hypocrisy of things or like witnesses greenwashing. He has no fear of exposing them, and so it's which I'm like, he has every right to do that. But I'm like, yeah. So it's been
That's
an interesting
amazing.
time. Thank you. So how one creates a company whose sole purpose is for environmental activism of moving the needle, that's what we're still trying to figure out. So
That actually leads into the next
mm,
question because like we're saying, like you have a lot of like you have the First Nations
mhm.
and some other great projects that you had on your website. And I'm just wondering, like between commercial and residential applications, I think residential is probably more of the focus now, but is eventually commercial something that you guys are going to be looking into, or is that already happening?
I think honestly we may have to start potentially commercial because right now our prices are a little higher because of the fact that we haven't scaled yet. So once we
Mhm.
scale production, that's going to bring our prices down. So I'm thinking your average renters may not be able to afford a $18,000 appliance that will totally cover their electricity consumption right off the bat. We may have to
Of
figure out
course.
like rent to own programs or like figure out like if there's any companies out there that offer that service that could like at least monetary companies. I'm not sure how that like
Mhm.
the ones that specialize in green infrastructure, green investments, renewable investments. So, but that like end goal, of course, would be that way. This could be like you go to IKEA and you see yourself a mobile solar carport appliance, and then you're like, I just want this for my driveway. We want to try to make it as simple as possible because everybody is just solar right now, stereotypically, or like in most people's minds. At least I'm hoping that's changing. It's just incredibly complex. People want to stay away from it because there's just so much red, and it's just they see solar and they think expensive, and but the big price tags comes from the red tape and the permitting and all the unnecessary. In reality, is actually the most affordable method of renewables if you're thinking of if you're able to have it if that is a possibility.
Okay, so I think the biggest thing that people don't realize is that solar doesn't actually have to be bolted to your roof or, tied to all the red tape. It doesn't have to be crazy expensive. Has that been a challenge getting that in front of people and, really showing them that solar is accessible? Not only is it, pretty affordable, but it's also something that they can plug in directly into, their daily lives and have that as a, component of how they do things day to day.
You pretty much nailed it. That's exact. I mean, it's to get that into once people have very much ingrained in their mind that solar is out of the question for them. It may be hard for them to like open their minds to this new deployment method, but many times we have a lot of support. We have like a whole backlog of people who want one. So now we have more demand than we are able to supply, which many people come in and saying, "Oh, you should seek investors." We want to be very careful with how we scale, because once we seek investor funding, then we have to raise our prices, which is the complete opposite of what we want to do. So again, we're scaling based off grant funding, and then also starting out with working with tribal nations is going to be, I think, our best way forward.
It's incredible. And like you mentioned before, you've had to deal with, some real resistance from like the regulatory side, especially in
Yeah.
Florida.
The Sunshine
And you
State.
slightly touched on it. Yeah, exactly. But what's the process been like, getting it recognized as a legitimate appliance rather than, traditional installation? I know you mentioned that in terms of marketing, it's not, necessarily something that you guys are pushing currently, but what's like the kind of the process and the steps that you guys are taking to maybe start getting it recognized, in a different light?
Well, it's a very lengthy and expensive process, but getting UL certification will really, or like not even getting UL certification, we can't get certification because the standard does not exist. So we are writing a new standard for electricity generating appliances. So that way we are an approved appliance for with all safety components all integrated, even though all of our components are UL certified, but the entire unit as a system needs to be UL certified is the idea. So once we have that, and that's already been published. The fact that we're in the process of this has been published in the North American Clean Energy magazine, and pretty much in all our pitches, we're very much emphasizing that we are working on UL certification. So and it also but we didn't need UL certification for our plug-in systems in South Dakota or in also in Las Vegas. We didn't need UL certification there. They saw the system as a EV charger with a coincidental solar array, and that was enough for them. So it's very interesting that each utility, it's almost kind of arbitrary to see how the utilities decide for themselves what they will and won't approve. So it's definitely been a big uphill battle trying to get these pretty simple connections to be approved. You have a ton of support in Europe, so I was thinking we could just drop everything and sell in Europe, but we're already here, so we at least should try as much as we can to get things working here. So
Of course. And I think that's actually part of something that I really respect about the company is that you're building a focus on equity, like making solar
yes,
available to people who have traditionally be excluded from it. And,
thank
in
you.
Europe, it's very, of course, you're mentioning how in Germany people have the solar things that they throw over their balconies. Like
Mhm.
it's such a smaller scale there, but it's so much bigger.
Yeah.
It's a bigger industry, but it's a lot smaller products, if that makes sense.
It is
So,
much smaller. Those are
like,
about 500 watt-ish panels, and we are using 750 watt panels, and we have 9 of them. So also that
exactly.
number will will scale, of course. They're mega powerful. Also, here's a funny joke for you listeners. My mom just recently trademarked. I promised myself I would never say this, but now it's part of every pitch. We've now trademarked "Make Electricity Great Again." So maybe we'll start making blue hats with yellow. Make electricity great again. However your heart may feel about that, my mom's like, I got that trademark and we're gonna use it. So I'm like, now I have been saying it. It's because it's funny and it's true. That's what we're trying to do. It used to be simple and then everything got more complex as soon as money got involved.
Of course. That'd be your marketing campaign right there.
It could be. That's a great point. I'm just fearful that it could be like a hit or miss. So I want to make sure everybody gets the message across, no matter how funny it is. But I usually get a
Of
good
course.
chuckle out of it. So that's my intention.
It is good. People like to respond to humor,
They
so
do.
100%. But that's great. But and then moving on, I think what does next year look like for you? Like in the next 6 to 12 months, are you guys scaling distribution, exploring maybe partnerships? I know it's not necessarily investors, but or iterating the mega design, whatever it is, like what's on the docket?
So we have now iterated our mega design to make it so that way it's a lot more volatile in size and use case. We've made it so that way there's sleeves and inserts. That way we can adjust the dimensions of it based on the fluctuating sizes of panels. So with supply chain constraints and tariffs and such, there may be certain panels we can't use. And if we're stuck with this exact dimension of it, because our our frame is to snugly fit fully flush panels on the insides, and if there's any small, sadly not all panels are made the same. A lot of them are very much vary by a couple inches or a couple millimeters on the width and length side. So that really, we want to make sure it's as snug and snugly and flushly fitting as possible. So that way it's also watertight. We made it so that way we could slightly adjust the frame in width and length by whatever couple inches is needed. Because of the sleeve insert, you can think of a kayak paddle. If you want to make it longer, you press a button, you can extend it, and it still has the same structural integrity. So it's doing the same kind of frame concept, and we have the patent on it. So it's just a matter of manufacture. My dad has now been manufacturing, doing the component welding. So I'll go join him and do that in July. I'll hop over back to Florida and we'll help him manufacture these. Depending on whether or not we're applying for a Bush Foundation grant, which would be paying for us to build 25 mega systems a year for over 5 years, specifically for the Lakota tribes, for the Lakota tribe or like nearby tribal nations. So if we get that grant, then we'll be focusing on manufacturing for Lakota tribes and teaching them how to manufacture themselves too. So that way they can kind of like have their own independent manufacturing there too, which is, that can change the job market there too, because they're also just to give a little pitch on Red Cloud Renewables, they work towards education, especially on their Native Americans. They have a special course for Native American women to teach them how to do solar installation. They make them certified solar installers. So you should check it out. And if you get a chance, I think you should interview Marie Kills Warrior. She works at Red Cloud Renewable, and she's their chief solar engineer, and she's super amazing. And that's what they're really promoting, and they're really enjoying so we're really enjoying that partnership. And we're also applying for another grant potentially I'm really hoping this one goes through in Connecticut, because there's a ton of opportunity for having, especially with the utilities in Connecticut, there's a ton of communities out there that have lots of sunny driveways, which is what we're looking for. We need sun, sun, and sun. That's what my dad always says. So if we get that, then it could pay for a significant installation there in Connecticut. So very vast areas. That's potentially on the docket. None of that has been officially confirmed, but fingers crossed that even if we don't get that, we've had people say no to us and we still keep going. So it's like, we want to travel the path of least resistance
Exactly. No, it's such a great place to be. I think you're so driven by the dream, the idea, the project that, no matter how many no's you get, you're that much closer to a yes. So
yes,
I
exactly.
think it's such a great mindset to be in. And,
thank you.
I honestly think it's fantastic what you guys are doing.
Thank you,
and just one
Yarek.
last thing I kind of want to,
Yeah.
of course. One last thing I just want to leave off with is you mentioned that with the natives, like the relationship is fantastic, and, all the developments that are going to be going in there, very soon. Dream collaborations or communities you'd love to work with, and I know that the natives are part of it, but
Yeah.
what other areas or communities are somewhere that are very high point of interest?
The vision, I think that would be the best is if we collaborate and work with solar installers. So people that are out there installing solar on people's roofs, they could add an option for manufacturing mobile solar carports in the comfort of their air-conditioned warehouse. And all they have to do an install or a deployment, so we call, is you just put it on your trailer, you drop it off, you plug it in, and then so they could do up to 10 a day. And they already have the infrastructure and partnerships with their own, the kinds of panels that they use. They already have the whole process themselves. And we've actually been approached by solar installer companies at RE Plus at renewable conventions, and they're the ones saying we could really see ourselves, if you license this to us, we could see ourselves, selling these to our clients and customers. But we have to also be very careful with quality control, because these systems are very specially made. So my dad and I would have to, create some sort of course or workshop or make sure that they all adhere to the right standards as to how they're assembled and welded and put together. So but I think like partnering with solar installers could really broaden the market and broaden the opportunity for these to exist in the United States, or in our world for that matters. And there's also a huge opportunity in Hawaii that we're trying to pursue, but it's really hard to pursue so many different things at once. There's an option where they're trying. There's a whole microgrid that's going to be installed, but they need means of generation for the microgrid. So they have the storage, they need the generation. So this is an option. Mm-hmm. So there's so many different opportunities, and I'm just allowing myself to get excited about all of them. So
that's fantastic. And just one last thing for my curiosity, how does it connect to the house? Because there's a lot of new innovations with batteries that are connected to the grid but can disconnect whenever they pull from low peak times, and then they stop during the high peak times.
Yeah.
So is there any applications with batteries as such as of yet?
Absolutely. I mean, we are connection agnostic, so there's also smart inverters with smart batteries, so that way they pull and use the battery storage whenever needed. But our whole thought process is when the sun is shining, we want it to be generating. We don't want it to, like, if you fill a battery to the max and you're not using it, then it's essentially that's That's like generation. That's like, I could, for some people see it as money. That's energy that could be generated that's not being taken advantage of. And we're thinking the adding batteries to the system does increase the return on investment time, so the time that it takes to pay for the system. So having a net metering and having that grid, that interconnections, that way it's producing whenever the sun is shining, will make it a lot faster for it to pay for itself, of course. But there is so many. We absolutely have been using the batteries, especially for the research, various kinds of batteries too. So it's of course that's what's most enticing also to utilities when they see that we actually just did a hackathon event in Oakland specifically, so that way utilities can actually have some sort of control of they could use our generation for when they need. It's like, say there was a certain scale of 80 megas or 80% distribution of megas in like a certain area code, for example, and a utility had a demand for, like, they're realizing they need energy, they could then like have control and select when they would like allow energy to backfeed. So there's a whole ton, but there was more people on the coding side of things. They were coding the specific program to work to be compatible with our mega system. So we had a mega at Port Labs, which is a super great community out there where they offer like a single location for a bunch of nerds to come together and try to solve a problem.
Great.
So it was really, really exciting to have various people from various backgrounds come there. And we're really like pushing towards an effort to make sure that is a possibility. Because, of course, I mean, I'm going to say it's a possibility. We've already been doing it. I'm saying possibility as in something that is standard that people don't blink an eye at. Because right now this is something that people are blinking lots of eyes at. Like, what is this new thing? We want it to become standard. We want it to become a regular, everyday thing. So that's the challenge. How do we do that? We're working on that. So easier said than done, for sure. Thank you. I hope that fully answers your question.
It absolutely does, and more. I think myself and the listeners will really appreciate, the angle that you've brought. This has been honestly one of the most inspiring and down to earth conversations we've had, where
thank you.
Your excitement really shows. Of course, like, your excitement really shows, and I think the people can really notice that this is something big. This is huge. This is one of those breakthroughs that other people will see and, maybe start their own kind of ideas, like piggybacking off of yours. So I think that gives me hope that energy is on the right track, because we've seen a lot of problems where, the clean energy world is getting wrong. It's going for all the wrong reasons. Then
that's what we're really
hoping.
And this UL standard that we are writing, or that UL is writing with Lawrence Berkeley Lab, that's not only going to help us, but that's going to help all of our competitors, everybody out there. Like, we're not doing it just for us, we're doing it for the industry. But of course, like, it's really hard and really expensive to do this, to do the whole new creation of a UL standard. It's very lengthy, very pricey. So, but again, of course, that's going to benefit everyone. Because once there's a standard for a plug-in solar appliance, as long as you adhere to the safety standards, then you should be able to apply for a UL certification. And then once they see that it adheres to all these standards, then you have a UL approved solar appliance, solar generator that can be approved via a plug. So that's the pipe dream. Even though it already exists in Europe, we can still have the pipe dream here.
Exactly. That's the biggest challenge, bringing the good stuff from over there.
Yeah, but what's funny is we came up with the idea independently from knowing what the plug-in idea concept in Europe. We're just like, and my dad's German, so I speak German. I'm a dual citizen with Germany and the United States, and so that was very exciting to be able to speak at the plug-in solar conference in Munich. But that being said, it was really telling to see, they really wanting to pursue making solar more accessible to those who stereotypically or normally wouldn't be able to have it. So that's
exactly
the same kind of thing that we're trying to work with. Thank you for hosting me on this and letting me share my message. Thank you for doing what you do. I'm sure the listeners and myself are all very grateful.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and a huge thank you for Antonia and the team at Gizmo Power for sharing such a powerful insight. If you're as intrigued as I am and what we are about where solar is headed and how solutions like Mega are reshaping energy access, make sure you follow along. We'll link Gizmo Power in the show notes so that you can learn more or reach out directly. And if you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing or sharing it with someone in your network who's working on clean tech, community energy, or scalable infrastructure. And until next time, stay curious, stay energized, and keep building what's next. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next time on Off the Grid on the Record.